You know what Ford did to the engines of millions of cars, and nobody said a word? They dunked the timing belt, the one part that should never ever touch oil, straight into the engine oil. It wasn't an accident, it wasn't a leak. It was an engineering decision. And to make it worse, they actually stretched out the replacement interval. If you've got a car with this engine, stop what you're doing and watch this video all the way through. I've been studying automotive mechanics for years, and I've seen plenty of crazy stuff in this industry, but this one left me with my jaw on the floor. And trust me, it's not easy to catch me off guard. Stick around until the end, because I'm going to walk you through exactly what Ford did, why this is a serious problem, and what you need to know so you don't get blindsided by a massive repair bill at the shop. If this kind of content is your thing, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we bring you the kind of information that automakers are praying you never find out about. It all starts back in 1962, with a car called the Glass 1004, built by a German company called Hans Glass. This little-known car holds a pretty interesting title. It was the first mass-produced car to use a rubber belt to drive the camshafts. Sounds like a small detail, but it wasn't. That decision changed the course of automotive engineering worldwide. The rubber timing belt was a game-changer, because it brought real advantages over the timing chain. It's quieter, because rubber doesn't make that metallic rattling noise that sounds like your engine is chewing on gravel. It absorbs vibrations, allows for a more compact and lighter engine, and when it needs to be replaced, the job is a whole lot simpler and cheaper than swapping out a chain. The advantages were clear, and by the 1970s, the rubber timing belt was completely standard on cars all over the world, including right here in the United States. But along with that popularity came a warning that every mechanic, every gearhead, and anyone who's ever popped a hood at least once in their life knows by heart. Timing belts and engine oil do not mix. Ever. Period. That's practically the golden rule of auto mechanics. The reason is pretty simple. When rubber comes into contact with oil, it swells, it cracks, it starts falling apart, and the belt fails. When it snaps, you lose synchronization between the crankshaft and the camshaft. And in an interference engine, which covers the majority of modern engines, that means the piston slams into the valves, bends the valves, and you're looking at a repair bill that can easily run $1,500 to $2,500 or more, depending on the engine. Your road trip turns into a nightmare, and your wallet takes the hit. That knowledge was handed down for decades, passed from mechanic to mechanic, father to son, manual to manual. It was rock-solid consensus. Then Ford came along in 2007 and decided to throw all of that right out the window. The engine in question is the Ford 1.8T DCI, a turbocharged four-cylinder diesel that powered models like the Focus and the Mondeo sold in Europe. Before 2007, that engine used a timing chain connecting the crankshaft to the high-pressure injection pump, and a conventional dry belt in the traditional setup. After 2007, the chain was pulled out and replaced by a wet belt, running fully submerged in oil, the same way the chain used to operate. Dunked inside the engine, in direct and constant contact with the oil. And you know what else Ford did? They stretched out the replacement interval. The dry belt needed to be replaced every 100,000 miles or 5 years. The wet belt got bumped up to 125,000 miles or 10 years. According to Ford, the oil lubricated the belt, which extended its service life. Something that for 40 years had been called a contaminant suddenly became a lubricant overnight. The main pitch was fuel economy. According to Ford, the oil lubricating the belt teeth would cut down friction against the camshaft gears, resulting in a 1% improvement in fuel consumption. 1%. Hold on to that number, because we're coming back to it in a minute, and it's either going to make you laugh or make you sick, depending on how much you've already dropped at the shop. In 2012, Ford made it clear they considered the technology a success, rolling it out into the 1.0 EcoBoost engine, a 3-cylinder turbocharged gas engine that quickly found its way into nearly every model in the lineup. Other manufacturers took one look at this and decided to get in on it. Renault was one of the first, dropping it into the 1.5 DCI diesel engines. Volkswagen followed with the 1.5 TSI gas engine. Opel threw it into their 1.2 and 1.5 turbo engines. And in 2013, Peugeot jumped in with the now famous, or rather infamous, 1.2 PureTech 3-cylinder turbo, which made its way into models sold across Europe and other markets. It looked like a revolution. Everyone jumping on board, everyone confident, and the customer sitting at the dealership with absolutely no clue what they were actually buying. Then we get to 2024, with more than enough data to say it loud and clear. The wet belt was a disaster. Exactly as the skeptical engineers, experienced mechanics, and anyone with a basic grasp of chemistry and physics had been warning from the very beginning. The technology caused thousands of premature belt failures, leading to catastrophic engine damage and repair bills that easily hit $1,500, $2,000, or even higher. And when the deterioration was caught in time, the owner still had to fork over between $400 and $900 just for a preventive replacement. Not a repair. Prevention. And it already cost that much. The vast majority of wet belts never came anywhere close to the recommended replacement interval of 125,000 to 150,000 miles. Most needed to be swapped out around 60,000 miles, which is actually less than a conventional dry belt would have lasted. And there are countless reports of belts giving out before the car even hit 60,000 miles. Nearly brand new car. Totaled engine. But wait, what about that 1% fuel savings? Let's crunch the numbers. An American who drives an average of 15,000 miles per year, in a car getting around 30 miles per gallon, burns roughly 500 gallons of fuel a year. With gas sitting around $3.50 a gallon, that's about $1,750 a year at the pump. 1% of that is $17.50 a year. $17.50. That's the benefit this technology actually delivers to the driver. $17.50 a year, in exchange for the risk of a $2,000 engine repair bill. In some cases, the repair cost more than the car was even worth, and the vehicle just got scrapped. So why does the wet belt fail? The answer is a lot simpler than the automakers would like you to know. No special rubber compound, no fancy coating is ever going to make a belt hold up permanently against hot oil, constant heat, and the sludge that builds up inside an engine over time. For this to even have a shot at working, the engine would need an oil change every 3,000 miles. But nobody today is going to buy a car with that kind of schedule. So manufacturers recommend changes every 7,500 to 10,000 miles, same as engines with dry belts or chains. And the math just doesn't add up. Wet belts had their worst track record in small 3-cylinder turbocharged gas engines. These engines push out over 100 horsepower from a tiny little block, and to pull that off they have to run under heavy boost all the time. Throw in the stop-and-go traffic of any major American city, plus summer heat pushing 95 to 100 degrees in places like Phoenix, Houston, or Atlanta, and you've got a perfect recipe for the engine to run hot. When the engine management system picks up on that, it dumps in more fuel and pulls back ignition timing to bring the temps down. The engine runs rich for longer stretches, which beats up the oil a lot faster. Worn-out oil tears up the wet belt a lot faster. It's a vicious cycle, and the driver has no idea it's going on under the hood. But the trouble doesn't stop there. The wet belt doesn't even need to snap to cause serious damage. As it breaks down, tiny rubber chunks break off and float around in the oil. Over time, those pieces pile up on the oil pump strainer. When things get clogged up enough, oil pressure drops, and accelerated engine wear kicks in, usually starting at the cylinder head and spreading through the rest of the engine if nobody catches it in time. A simple oil change won't cut it. You've got to drop the oil pan and clean the strainer by hand. If the pressure drop has already happened, there's a good chance the oil pump, the vacuum pump, and the variable valve timing actuators are going to need replacing too. You walk into the shop with one problem and walk out with a whole list of them. Now here's the part of this story that really gets under my skin. Everything I just told you is not new information. This is knowledge that's been out there for over 50 years about how rubber behaves when it sits in hot oil. And there were real-world examples right in front of them to learn from. Certain engines used in the Opel Insignia, Alfa Romeo, and even Volkswagen and Audi models used a rubber O-ring between the oil pump and the pickup tube. Over time, that O-ring would dry out and cause the exact same problem: oil pressure drop and engine wear. And that O-ring doesn't even move. It just sits there, and it still failed. Now picture a belt, under constant tension, handling engine torque, spinning at high speed, trying to hold up against the hot oil surrounding it. I'm absolutely certain that at some point, in some conference room, somebody raised their hand and said this was a bad idea. And I'm pretty sure that person got steamrolled by people who had other priorities in mind. When the first wave of failures started rolling in, the automakers didn't pull the plug on the technology. They recommended more frequent inspections for vehicles used in severe driving conditions. And you know what they called severe conditions? Short trips and stop-and-go traffic, which is the daily routine of just about anybody living in an American city. The big technical solution they came up with to check belt condition was a small metal gauge. A simple tool you press against the belt, and if the belt doesn't fit between the two prongs of the thing, it needs to be replaced. Because a wet belt can swell up and need replacing without showing any visible signs of wear. It looks perfectly fine, and it's lying straight to your face. In recent years, some manufacturers have quietly started swapping wet belts back out for dry belts and chains, going back to conventional technology. But that's only happening now, after an enormous number of failures, a ton of bad press, and a pile of lawsuits. The technology stayed on the market for over 15 years, generating steady revenue for manufacturers through part sales. And here's a detail that really tells the whole story. Not a single Japanese automaker put a wet belt in their engines. Toyota, Nissan, Mazda, Subaru, none of them took the bait. That says everything. This frustrates me in a way that goes way beyond cars. Instead of using technology to solve problems, it was used to create problems for the sake of profit. And the American consumer, who already pays too much for a car and already feels the pain at the pump, ended up stuck with a massive bill caused by a decision that never should have made it off the drawing board. It should not be allowed for manufacturers to release technology with predictable flaws, dress it up with fuel economy talking points, and keep cranking out that same technology for 15 years while the evidence of failure piles up right in front of everybody. If you're shopping for a new or used car, do your homework first and find out if it has a wet belt. My honest advice is simple. Walk away. If this video opened your eyes, share it with someone who's out there shopping for a car right now, because this information could save a lot of people a lot of money. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you in the next one.